have to say that when I heard about this play, Slave Play, down at New York Theater Workshop, I was like, I am not going to see that. That is going to upset me, and I'm not doing it to myself. And I had an intern who's half British, half West Indian, biracial girl, and she was like, no, it was fabulous. It was lovely. It's not about slavery at all. You have to go. And so So out of respect for her, I went, and I got a free ticket. That was definitely key. And as soon as it started, I was like, oh my God, Jeremy is like writing my life. How does he know my personal life? And I loved it. But not everybody felt the same way. There was like a petition, 3,500 people to shut it down at New York Theater Workshop. And some friends of mine who went to see it last week, some young queer people, told me they were traumatized. They were traumatized. They couldn't even come to my house and talk to me about it. So I think that the truth is always polarizing. I think that whenever you find something that is truthful, it is going to divide people. There are going to be people who hate and people who love. And for me, that is honestly the test of the truth. In working on this play and performing this play, what has been the most outrageous or challenging thing you had to face within yourself, or that you had to confront with an audience member or a friend or a family member in terms of you doing this work? Sullivan.
Oh, come on. Why me?
Tell us your name fully, even though I called your name.
Sullivan Jones is my name. I play Philip. Also, being here gives me a little anxiety because this feels like Act 2 a little bit. With the water bottles. Has everyone here seen the play? Just so we know what we're...
Oh, a lot of virgins, a lot of virgins.
Wait, so who hasn't seen the play?
Most of the people here.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, most of the people here.
Okay, well, spoilers are coming.
Yes. And I think spoilers are good because then you're prepared.
Yeah.
I think it's good. So if they tell you something, then you'll be like watching how they're doing it to you.
And we close Sunday, so you probably don't have tickets. You might.
Yeah.
But this is Google, so you probably do have tickets. Okay, can you repeat the question?
Yes. I asked you in this process of doing this play, what's been the most difficult, challenging thing that came up for you, either personally or in some family member or audience member or friends response to this work that you're doing?
Oh, okay, so it's gonna get personal real quick, I mean, because of the question. I'm biracial, my mom is white, dad is black, and so my character is biracial, and there's a lot of things around multi-ethnic, multi-racial relationships that are worked out in the play. I've been in a relationship with a white person, and in the play I'm with a white person, and we sort of have our tension as a result of that. And it made me, in my relationship with a white person, have to have some really serious conversations and ask some questions, and yeah. I'm being oblique for a reason.
But why are you being oblique? Come on now, you can't
Where's
be oblique.
The camera? Let me look
give
at
us
the
a,
camera.
give us, come on. No oblique,
Okay,
no oblique.
here's-
We're at Google because they're gonna find out. They got a Google in your house, okay? So you should tell it yourself before somebody in Google is in your house and then they put it out there.
I think being, I'm trying to figure out, because I don't want to put this person on blast and like be putting people's information out there, but I think it's a lot of questions that were raised for me is like what is the public presentation of being with a person of a different race? So in your private relationship, it's one thing, right? When you're Netflixing and chilling and just hanging out and having a good time. But when you walk out of the house and all of a sudden it's like, you as a 6'4" black man and a white person next to you, what does that mean in Midtown versus what it means in Bed-Stuy versus what it means in Connecticut versus what it means in Kentucky, et cetera, et cetera. And so I live in Bed-Stuy, which is why I said Bed-Stuy, and it's a predominantly black neighborhood. And when I walk through Bed-Stuy with a white person, I felt a certain amount of shame, because there's a history of brothers who, as soon as they get successful, they date white women, and that can be, you know, we can talk about like whether or not that's real or true or not. But I would be in Bed-Stuy and sort of be with my white lady and be like, fuck, I'm that dude. I'm the, and feeling shame about that. Like, and seeing the looks in people's faces, particularly black women in the neighborhood, like, this nigga out here with a white woman, and having to wrestle with that, and what the play did for me to bring it home, and we can pass this off, so I'm not talking with too much, which is already too late. But you asked a fucking crazy question.
That's why they picked you.
Damn. What it made me do is the conclusion I came to was only you as an individual know what saves your life. If it's the music you listen to, the food you like, the people that you're with. And this person I decided is the kind of person who is saving my life and is a source of salvation for me. And if people can't handle that, be it white or black, then that's their problem. And so when I walk down the street now, when I'm with my lady and I'm in front of black people, I can absorb that, whatever's coming from them, I acknowledge it and I absorb it, but I also say, this is my truth, and I'm living my truth, and this is my life, and if you're not happy about it, I'm sorry, but I am. So the play made me double down on that, which is crazy because the play sort of, you would almost think that it would take you in an opposite direction, but it actually took me to the thing that I just said, so.
Awesome,
yeah.
Awesome. James.
Oh. Just jump to the back row. I'm James and I play Dustin in the play. The biggest lesson or challenge, so Dustin and my character represents this white passing person of color within the cast who can't recognize his privilege in passing in white spaces. And
can I ask you, because we can't tell, what is your ethnic background?
Yeah, totally. My family's Syrian.
Okay.
You know, it's very complicated within the Arab and Syrian community even because with my family, there was so much a desire to assimilate into white culture and white neighbors. There's certain Arabs that consider themselves white. There's certain Arabs that don't consider themselves white. The conversation surrounding of how does this person identify himself within this space, and my character, he just refuses to take on the white identity for this week-long therapy, and he can't give that, he can't recognize that privilege and identity for his black partner, which is what the therapy is for. This week is for the black partner. So, you know, it's for me, it was an examination of my history and my past within my own family of, you know, depending on the season or my skin color and my tan and how certain white family members of mine would make fun of me for how dark I got, and then they didn't want me to tell people that I was Arab or tell people that I was Syrian because I grew up in a mostly Irish, Italian neighborhood, and especially post 9/11, there was people didn't want to tell their neighbors that they were Arab, and they were scared. So wrestling with that as a white passing person of color, in the society, but also taking on the greater lesson of understanding what spaces I walk into and always looking out for the person who has less privilege than I within the room. And that's been the lesson of this play, but also lesson of life is walking forward into 2020.
Great, thank you. Irene.
Okay. I think the play has been challenging personally in a lot of different ways. One of the things that that sparked like a lot of difficulty in my life was when we had we call her Talkback Tammy. I don't know if you know about this incident. We had a Q&A. Jakina and Jeremy were on stage, and a white woman interrupted somebody's question and then had almost like a tantrum almost of like, what, you know, I'm always being called a racist. We're said that we're the problem, but how can I be the problem if I'm oppressed too, was her sort of POV. And she mentioned a lot of things that were happening in her life. And after that, I had a conversation about this with some of my white female friends, and they immediately worried about that woman's mental health and prioritized that and the filming of her over having held the entire theater hostage and interrupting Jeremy, interrupting Jakina, and not really getting them to speak. And it's shown me a lot of blind spots that I have, but also that a lot of my white friends have, in prioritizing who gets the space, who gets to suffer more, who gets to be injured more. And that's been difficult. I'm Puerto Rican and I'm white, and there's this whole arroz con pollo, like there's a whole mess of like ethnicity and race, and it's all hodgepodge. But ultimately, you know, I've realized the amount of privilege that white people have, whether or not they're, regardless of what their background is, and how those issues are also affecting us in Puerto Rico. And we don't talk about them very much in Puerto Rico.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Alexander Nolan, and I'm perfectly cast as Jim. Because my character comes from Britain, and I'm not British, but I am Canadian, and our relationship with American slavery, we have our own scandals in our past with our indigenous community, but we don't have the same history with slavery. And so what I faced coming into slave play was, you know, a lot of ignorance around slavery, but also just my ignorance as a white person around the experience of the black body and the black people in the world, not just in the United States, but in Canada. And just listening, and I would say that I'm a pretty good listener, but you know, having to walk into that space every day and face my own ignorance was tough. Not as punishment to myself, but just to realize how hard you actually have to work to understand something from someone else's point of view, and how, you know, coming from so much privilege, that I'd never had to do that. You know, that's a hard thing to look at in yourself. And so the play's been a real gift to me for that, because you know, I still have a lot of listening to do and a lot of growth as a person in the world. But you know, I'm certainly glad to have been pushed down that path. But that's my answer.
Thank you. Shalia.
Hi, I'm Shalia Latour. Big thing that I've taken away from this are similar things that Sullivan was saying that he was dissecting. Like, I'm a fair-skinned black woman, and in my family, it's this like skin tone isn't by way of any purposeful interracial partnerships. Like, this is like by ways of, you know, generations of slavery and children who've been abandoned. Like, and that's how I get my skin tone. And so a lot of my family doesn't talk about the why of this color. And I know through this play that it's given me the opportunity to break down these like arguments, questions, and confusions to where I sit in the diaspora, with so much lack of history or connection, or like who means family and who doesn't. And I know, like, even there are conversations that I had with my mother, who's much fairer than I am, who has never talked to me about her experience with race in any real depth until she saw this play. And she could say, no, in high school, I felt like Philip. And then at this point, I felt like Kanisha. But then here, I felt like Dustin. And then I don't know. And then I think I was Patricia here. And to then have a thing where, because then the conversations of being someone who's in a body that you don't quite understand how it functions now has context. And that's been a huge gift and lesson for me of realizing how many of us are still trying to find context to speak about ourselves and each other, and that's going to take time and an offering up of so many examples so that we can, yes, celebrate how we same, but celebrate the difference so that there can be a saming afterwards, has been a real gift of this. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Atto.
Hi, I'm Atu Blinkson Wood.
Louder. I think your mic is on.
I'm Atu Blinkson Wood. I play Gary in the play. And I guess one of the challenging things and also one of the gifts of this play has been coming to terms with, so there's this, in acting school, we had this one exercise that was about finding the one line of the character that is the center of them, and they call it their spine line. And I think for Gary, his spine line is "motherfucker, I am the prize." That is the thing that he is walking toward. That this thing that is holding him up throughout this play. The thing that he's sort of circling and trying to figure out. And that's been the challenge for me. Is playing a character that is not me, but I think at the time I first encountered Gary, that I did not see myself as prized. I didn't feel prized by the world around me, and I didn't prize myself. And I think that was a huge challenge to really confront that I had been walking through the world devaluing myself, buying into a lot of ideas that white supremacy project about Black people, and specifically Black queer people. I think, I said it the other night that we had a talk back after the all Black the audience. We had an audience full of Black folks, 800 Black folks filled the Golden Theater, and at that talk back, I said that I feel like saying that line every night has been me healing myself, casting this spell on myself, reminding myself that I have value, real value, and no matter what is projected at me, that value comes from within, and that is just something I'm gonna walk away from this experience with. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Jakina.
Jeez. I think the hardest part has honestly been taking up space and feeling comfortable with taking up space and speaking from that place. I'm first generation Angolan, was born and raised in Atlanta, and I grew up from a political refugee family, and so I'm the youngest of four, and a lot of my childhood was spent with me not talking. I wasn't allowed to have opinions about anything because you don't have opinions, you know what I mean, at that age about things. And so a lot of my struggle, even in school, people would confuse my silence for aggression, for people thinking that I'm judging them, when that's just literally how I learned and how I was raised. And so in the second act of this show, the character is completely silent for the majority of the first act, and she doesn't speak. And the hardest part was what I would interpret, I guess it's the perspective is what I'm struggling with, because I would assume, and I would see sometimes, the audience listen more so honestly to the white people in the cast and completely ignore what the Black people were saying. And it was hard for me not to say, oh my God, you're really not listening. It was hard for me not to get angry, not to take it out on people, and I struggled with that for a lot of this run. And then we had a blackout night, and where it was a predominantly, Atu said, just predominantly Black audience, and from beginning to end, by the end of it, I finally felt peace, and I never felt that in a run in the way, and I realized that the room was carrying the weight of racial trauma with me from the jump. And we had an energy woman come in to talk about clean pain and dirty pain, and how in the clean pain, there's grace. It's a giving thing, even if it's uncomfortable. You have to come from a gracious place of knowing that you're giving something, and so I had to learn how to still give and say, no, they can carry it, and I'm gonna allow them to carry it and trust them to carry it as we go through this process. So that's been hard. That's been the thing that I've been struggling with.
Okay.
Right?
That's heavy.
Just a little light talking.
So in 5 minutes, I'm going to ask you actually to start lining up at the microphones to ask questions. And I have one more question that I'm going to ask before I turn it over to you. The final scene of the play, controversial for people. This is a, what do you call those things when you tell people that's what's going to happen?
Spoiler.
It's a spoiler. It's a spoiler. A lot of black women feel, you know, just let down, upset by that scene, you know, why you got to do that to the black woman. I'm asking the two of you about playing a rape scene, which I have to say for me, it's not a rape scene. You know, I think that one of the things for me about BDSM that is indicative of American culture is that we often call things the opposite of they are, like calling brown people minority. We are the majority on the planet. I don't call myself a minority, I'm not. We are the majority people on the planet. And so people have this misunderstanding about BDSM in that they think that the Dom, they don't understand that the Dom is the servant. Did you guys know that the Dom is the servant? I'm asking a question. Did you know that the Dom in a BDSM relationship is a servant? Yes. Okay, so some people knew. So in a BDSM relationship, the Dom is the servant. And what it means when you are a Dom is it means that you have to give all your attention to the other person. You must pay attention. You have to look at what are they looking for, what do they want, and you're there to provide it, to give them what they want. And they get the safe word. They get to say no. And what I loved about this play, for me, I said it is white supremacy personified, because to me what white supremacy means, and it doesn't have anything to do with anyone's skin color or lack or of melanation, it is a person who in a relationship wants to switch positions. I'm the Dom now, I'm the sub now, and the other person doesn't get a choice. You have to be what I want you to be whenever I want to switch, which means you've got a Dom all the time, which means you've got to spend all your energy always trying to figure out who am I today, because I have all the control, I pull all the strings, you have to serve me all the time, even when I want to be the Dom, pretend to be the Dom. And so to me, that is what this play articulates very, very well. But if you're coming from a place where you understand the Dom as the person who's just got on the leather and the whip and stuff, and you think that they're in control, they are not in control. So I never saw this scene as a rape scene. I saw it as a scene about a woman asking a man to carry the load. Stop having me have to serve you all the time, and I need you to serve me. I need to know that you have the power, the control to actually make me feel like you could control me rather than me having to control you all the time. So let's talk about this rape scene at the end of Play. Thanks. I'm caught. Okay, go ahead. You guys talk.
You're starting, honey.
Oh, Lord. How do
and
we
guys start lining up? Yeah.
How do we talk about this?
Well, do you feel violated? Like, oh my God, this violation has occurred to me. This man wrote a rape scene for me.
We've never talked about this, by the way.
We've never had a discussion about this, so that's very
let's have the
interesting,
conversation.
Too. What Jeremy wrote in the play is, if you get a chance to read the script, it's very graphic and it's also very violent. What you see on stage is not what Jeremy wrote. What we do, which I think is a big difference. And if I'm being honest, even in BDSM relationships, there's a point of pain that has to essentially happen for this switch to go into this subspace, what they call this ecstasy space, that happens after that type of violation. You know what I mean? It's like right at a pivotal point. And for me, sorry, I'm like hitting the mic. I could understand, I think depending on where you are in your own specific journey, some people will always see a white body on this dark-skinned woman as a rape. They're just gonna automatically see that. With the title slave pay, that's where they're gonna come in and that's where they're gonna take away. And I think for people who have moved beyond that, quite honestly, and who listen to the words, are gonna see that as an exorcism, which is what he wrote. The last act is called Exercise. So in that moment, in this act, it only takes in the doing of him fully embodying the trauma, the everything that he's supposed to embody, that she's asking him to embody. So she's not crazy, finally, you know what I mean? And when it happens, that's when this huge exorcism can happen of saying, thank you for listening, and not thank you for raping me. And I think people get that deeply confused because the word Starbucks is used, and he fully follows it. Yeah, I don't know how to discuss this without people maybe having questions about it, but I think it's interesting that we never had a conversation, quite honestly, about it.
Well, first of all, Starbucks is the safe word that Jim and Kenesha, our characters, have for when it's gone far enough. And so she stops the fantasy scene by saying Starbucks. Yeah, I mean, part of the reason I don't think we talked about it is I don't know this about you, but I like to let acting kind of live in this magical space where if you talk about it too much, it doesn't have that vibration, because two people can have different opinions about the same scene and the scene can be magic, right? The scene can have vibration, and once you define what that thing is, it's hard to. It's like why directors always said don't sleep with your co-star, right? You won't have any sexual chemistry with them anymore or something like that. But you know, I was always uncomfortable with people seeing it as a rape scene because, of course, I'd never signed up for a play where a white man rapes a black woman on stage. I always saw it as something hopefully healing in some way for her and for him, as painful as it is. And so it always felt very clear to me that it was his Hail Mary to try to save his marriage, because, of course, he thinks it's insane to try to do this. He doesn't want to do it, and he's resisted it for the entire therapy, which is you know, a week long at a plantation in Virginia. But you know, there's consent in the scene. And for us, it feels very clear. But like I think what you said, for certain individuals, it may never feel like anything but a rape.
Yeah, and I think it ends at the beginning of something, right? It's not, you don't get a clear ending, wrap-up moment of what this play is. It's like a cliffhanger. You don't know what's going to happen next, and it's very unsettling for people. And I think that's the thing that people don't like to feel. At the end, you don't know what's going to happen with this couple. What does it mean? And it leaves you right there for you to process. It's really cruel.
Yeah, but...
and on that cruelty, I'm going to open it up. This African-American... Oh,
I was just gonna...
You wanted to say something.
I was just gonna say that, like, hearing you say that, like, it ends on this cliffhanger, you like, it's hard for people to process. It's like, that is actually where we are with race relations in America. We're at a big old question mark. And so, like, if we're not all gonna lean in and have the conversation, like, we're pretty fucked. So I just, like, I'm deeply grateful to this play for, like, leaving it on a question mark and being like, so what are you gonna do about it?
Yep.
You know? So.
Excellent. Please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Frances. I am recently lead for Inclusion at Scale at Google. I saw the show twice, once with the all-black audience and once with my white-looking Ecuadorian wife. And so first, just thank you. So often on Broadway, I think shows are windows rather than mirrors for me. And so the extent to which I was able to see myself at different points in the show is just so magical. And I also think that I deeply disagree with the ending being a question mark, but I think we are so disused to the centering of the needs of the Black woman that we're like, oh, we don't know how that ended. We ended with you getting what you needed. And that's a powerful conclusion for a show, and it is shocking and jarring and different. And so we're like, what does that look like? I don't even know what that means. So yeah, so that was dope. And so I was like, my wife has to come with me to see this, right? So so that's that. I want to say thank you. You're so awesome. Okay. So in my work, focus on inclusion at scale at Google, focus on diversity and inclusion at Google, we do a lot of design work to intentionally think about what are the different opportunities we have to push the boundaries of where folks are to change behavior and ultimately foster collaboration, innovation, and and just positive sentiment at Google. And that's really challenging. And one of the things that I loved about slave play is that there were all of these entry points for conflict and for question and for challenge. And so I just wanted you to talk a little bit about what you think are the rules of engagement for creating those challenge points. How do you kind of know, like when you're riding that wave, like what is the place where the challenge points are created? And wanted you to kind of tease that out a little bit more.
Get any, go for it.
I mean, I don't think this answers your question, but it is a little bit of a physical, almost like diagram of something we were taught in the energy, the Reiki session that we had. She had a small circle and then a bigger circle, and then she had she said that in the small circle in the center is sort of your home base where you're most comfortable, if you can find like a safe space for you, whatever that may be. In the area in the middle that's between your safety and the border of the larger circle is the area of challenge, and that's where you can have areas of clean pain. You're being challenged, you're uncomfortable, but you can tolerate your discomfort. Beyond that greater circle is where you're in an area of panic, and when you're panicking, you can't process anything. And what I like about this play is that I feel like it lives in that area of challenge where I don't think a single one of us is ever comfortable in this play. But I think it is about tolerating your discomfort and having a deep listening to things that might be difficult to listen to. But it is tricky to find that area of challenge that doesn't get people to a place of panic. I don't have answers, but I know that helped us at least.
I just want to say that, you know, I've also dated a lot of white men, and one of the things that my previous white partner and I would argue about is that he would say I was making him uncomfortable. And I would say, I'm uncomfortable all day, every day. Can you live with being uncomfortable for the sake of coming and meeting me and understanding where I am? And I feel like one of the challenges of privilege is privilege means you actually just don't have to be uncomfortable because everything works for you and is set up for you to be comfortable. And I think that the bridge that is needed for people who get to live in a privileged space is for them to get the privilege of actually getting comfortable with their discomfort, because it's a power place. When you can be uncomfortable and still do what you got to do and do it brilliantly, that's a place of power rather than needing everything to make you comfortable. So that's my thought about it. You know, getting people to ease into living in discomfort, and that being your launch pad for power and work in the world. Yes.
Hi, my name is Jessica Charles, and I actually come to this as not a Googler, but a playwright. And so I thank you guys for what you've done. I really appreciate and understand the energy and effort that goes into doing something like this. I love being uncomfortable, and I actually left the play feeling that there was a complacency left with the white audience that I was around. From start to beginning, actually, when I entered the space, it was mirrored, and I actually didn't see my reflection, but I saw a lot of reflection of white faces. And then we go through this, and the only woman of color is silent. And then we get to a place where she has 40 minutes of calling white people viruses, and then something that is, in my opinion, act of generations of abuse is enacted upon her. And then she says, thank you. And then the white audience stands and claps, and they're thanked for, sitting through 40 minutes of being called viruses. So I left feeling silenced and in a situation where it was supposed to give a Black woman agency. I actually felt an extreme lack of agency. I felt the people that were standing around me were white people clapping, feeling happy that they could partake in this experience. And she says, thank you to you. And they say thank you to themselves. And they go home and they have dinner and they feel happy that they could be part of this experience and know what it's like to be a Black woman for 40 minutes, which I left saying, wow, I don't feel that way, and I would have said something. And regardless of the BDSM community, there's something in that we need to be aware of being put on stage in front of white faces. And in interviews with Jeremy, he says, I was trying to create a play about Black communities and put it in front of white people so they can understand. So my question and comment is, one, do we need to take Black stories and put them in white spaces for white people to possibly feel better that they can understand? Why do we need to actually really consider the agency and the voice, even if we're trying to make people uncomfortable, push the button, talk about these things? Do we still need to consider the larger implication of other bodies, othered bodies as well, that sit in the space as well and do not see themselves when they're told they should see themselves?
I think something that that Jeremy has also said that I feel was reflected in both of those blackout nights. It's like this play is also doing the work of letting Black people know that they are invited and have a place in the space of Broadway, right? Also, and like that, were we fully successful? I don't know. Like, have we changed Broadway forever? I don't know. But I do feel like the work that was being done was to send up a flare with this particular play, because I do feel like this play is coded for Black folks. I honestly, like, in my gut, feel that way after having sat in both of those audiences, having performed in front of both of those audiences. So yeah, I essentially what I'm saying to you is that I do feel like the work that is being done with this play is to say, like, let's change the demographic, actually. It's not about putting these stories in front of white folks. It's about saying these stories are here for you, Black folks, to come into this space that has been predominantly white for such a long time. I don't know if that fully answers your question. But
Leah.
Well, and I was gonna say too, I think there's one of the things that's really challenging, or first just to like affirm the things that you're saying that we feel on the stage as well. Like with what Joaquina was talking about earlier, like it is a very different play to go up and, like, I know for like my character specifically, like Taya's big thing is that she is her whole pain goes in what she isn't saying. That even though she's constantly talking, she's constantly like rephrasing, starting and stuttering, being interrupted, and just re-navigating. And when it is in front of a predominantly white space, we'll go backstage and realize like, oh, I don't know if anyone saw the microaggressions, the macros, the thing that is so innate to my body. I don't know if people saw it. And it just like that hit is felt from us too. It's not that it's not there. It is an interesting thing to like take on a play and say, I know that there's truth here. I don't know if people are ready to see it or if they want to see it. There's so much of this show because it is in a lot of ways juxtapositions of so many images and arguments that people can show up and they will see very similar to like a Rorschach test. You will see what you can see. Versus when we were in blackout nights, it's like, if I just turned my head this much to the left and looked at a Black person, everyone knew what happened. Everyone knew. And how to, because there's especially as a theater maker as well, like there's this two-handed thing, like either there can be the play that we have so well crafted and so well symbolized exactly what each argument means to be for a very particular audience, or there's a thing of like, I'm gonna put everything up here so actually blatantly Black of what's happening, but it's with the nuance of our everyday experience and say, regardless of what this audience is going to get, I'm gonna tell the truth in the most nuanced way I know how. That is a very scary place to be, and it does take the blackout nights to get the affirmation, to get those after show conversations, these right now of being like, oh my God, I just know from the team, like how aware we are that we wish you could be in a predominantly Black audience because you would see more of your reflection just by way of even the hearing of gasps when you knew that there should have been a gasp, silences where there were laughter. Like you would have felt that. And the sad thing is like the show we came to put up is was it Francis that said earlier, like it's a mirror, not a window. And so all we can reflect, the only energy that can be reflected in the room is the energy that also came to meet us. And I think there is a need to be very pointed in the images. Like everyone's particular performance is so, even though it seems really, it's so specific. But I think we're trying to put up something that just shows how important it is of these spaces to make sure who is coming to see it, because it will have a different experience for everyone. It is theater is a reciprocal thing. It's not a film. We can't choose where people are going to look or what experience you're going to get from moment to moment. It's all 800 plus 8 of us who are going to make this experience. And there is a thing of like how then to, with some of the top acts we had on Sundays, it's like how to then look at your neighbor and be like, oh, you saw this and you still didn't see me. And I've been sitting next to you this whole time.
And I'm going to come to you and Sullivan and Jakina, and I want to say for me, because I see so much theater, probably 50 shows a year, I'm so tired of seeing white ennui. So I'm glad that you felt something, because to me, that's what theater's supposed to do. It's supposed to make you feel something, make you hate it, make you get mad, and you go write the play that's the answer, the play that you wanted to see. I prefer that to, forgive me, to I think that we as Black people are so thirsty for ourselves, and we want the images to be positive, that we often miss the propaganda in a Black Panther or in a Watchmen, where we're just so happy that we're pretty and we're supposed to be the lead, and we miss that this is just a piece of propaganda throughout the entire thing. So for me, I'm excited that you may write the play that you want to see. And maybe that play will be on Broadway rather than that you came to see something, oh, that was so good. Now you're upset. Something has stirred up in you. And no. But I'm saying it stirred you. It stirred you. To me, that's what theater, that's why I was drawn to the theater. I wanted to stir people and for them to leave and be called to action. So to me, yes, to your pain and your discomfort, what art are you going to bring from it? Sullivan and then Jakina.
No, agreed. I think that I'm seeing two pieces to what you said, and please, tell me if I'm off. But one is that when you bring a play to a Broadway space, it's a lot of wealthy white people, and Jeremy and co have tried to infiltrate and change the demographic of the people who have come to see the play. We've had 2 blackouts and all the rest that he's done, and I think that that's a longer term project for all of us to get theaters, the audience, more reflective of what we had on stage. And then the other piece is, to what Tanya was saying, like, white male directors, you have white men got Steven Spielberg and Quentin Tarantino, and like, people can see Quentin's movies and be like, that dude's crazy. I'm gonna go over here with Steven. And Steven's people, or people who don't like Steven's stuff can be like, but I fuck with Quentin's stuff. It's wild and it's crazy. But for Black people, it's like one voice. It's a monolith. It's uniform. So to have that experience and come in means that we are shifting the conversation, and we're gonna have a plethora of voices. We're gonna have a lot of people who are representing different points of view, and to see that in the space with white people, like I guess here a question, and then maybe Jakina can play off of it, is if you like, let's say you came to a blackout, do you think that your experience, was it that you were with white people that you had such the reaction, or do you feel like you would have had the same dramaturgical issues with the play even if you were among mostly Black people?
So I went into the play with actually a lot of my Black female playwright and actors telling me to not go. So that was the first start. So and to also say, I think that there's a plethora of current Black playwrights. I think Jeremy got his name on Broadway, but like, there are a lot of us. We are out there. So to say, but thankfully there's one person that got in that Broadway door. But no, I think that my takeaway would have been the same, because I think there's a lot of play on the title, the trigger words, the leaving people uncomfortable. But again, as I said, I think it actually left people feeling comfortable. I think that the action and a lot of people in their heads felt like, oh, I felt destabilized, but really they could go home and say, oh yeah, I was part of something that made me question myself. Like, I think in the current climate that we're in, that made people comfortable and drew them into being like, I can be part of the conversation, and I'm not a problem, I'm part of the solution. I can eat dinner and go to sleep feeling good. So I feel like regardless of the audience, that's what I took from it. But I do think also I heard about the blackout in California from a producer of the show in a hot tub. Like, I didn't hear about it in New York from any of my black people in New York. So I also wonder, like, where was it publicized? And like, it didn't reach a lot of black audiences that I know as well. So.
First of all, thank you for sharing your truth. I think it's interesting. I think, honestly, our audience changes every night. Sometimes there will be a predominantly white audience and they are completely silent and shook the whole time. They're uncomfortable. They leave, they don't even know the play has ended, and they like this, and it takes an usher to start this for them to try to clap. There are people who are collapsed by this. And then sometimes there are black people who in the front row in a predominantly white audience who are living their full life, snapping and clapping and saying thank you, right? We get a mix of audiences. So I don't want to knock your experience, but I do think we've had a lot of different audiences come into this thing, and specifically because Jeremy has made tickets accessible by making them $35. Honestly, on rush tickets to bring young people here, queer people here, black people here. Like, this is a lot of people's first Broadway show. You know what I mean? We're getting like a new kind of audience, a new kind of people who it's their first experience in a Broadway house, in a theater house. So the etiquette is just switching around anyway of what it means to be an audience member in the space, which is really cool. And I also wanted to say, because this is a thing that I'm struggling with a lot, is how when we are in these predominantly white spaces and we see a piece that is about us, how can we fully enjoy it without having to worry about what our partner is thinking? But how can we just sit and be and not feel as if we have to also carry, why are you laughing? It shouldn't matter. This is for you. And I wish we could get to a point to where we weren't so, we weren't so worried, quite honestly, about how our partner is viewing this thing, because I think theater is a very personal experience. You're gonna have your own journey, you know what I mean? And I think we as black people, we carry that a lot, specifically when it comes to race and what we're showing on this stage. It's an uncomfortable thing to be in the presence of a predominantly white audience, so I take that, and I just wish our people would, when we get in those spaces, not care. I want to see more people living fully clapping, saying yes and thank you, and yes, you messed up. Oh, read him for filth. I wish more of that was disrupting the Broadway stage, because that is theater. Shakespeare's time, they used to throw apples and shit at people. Like, why do we feel like we are at an opera? That's not what this is. And I want more people to disrupt the space. And I think that's what Jeremy is starting to do, and more people are starting to be around. So thank you for writing. I hope to see your stuff out there too.
Yes.
Can't wait to see it.
Yes. Oh, another question over here.
Yeah, I've maybe a somewhat related question about sort of the comfort of the audience at the ending. So hearing kind of the interpretation of the ending tonight, when I saw it, I read the final line of the play as being sarcastic, especially I think because Jim had such a hard time talking about any of these issues, and the kind of the final like sex scene is in response to you saying a lot of very difficult things to respond to, and instead of him engaging with you like in conversation, it seems like he does the easier thing, which is to like do the physical act as opposed to actually engaging with all of the things that you've just said. And so I'm curious sort of like how, I guess the therapy is like, obviously he's been uncomfortable having to act out in the performances like throughout that week, but he's obviously also been very uncomfortable just talking about any of these issues as well. So how do you sort of think about the performative aspects of the therapy that you're doing versus just the like discursive aspects of it? And how does that change kind of like how you interpret like the healing of that last scene? Because I didn't hear him say anything that sort of seemed to really like internalize.
Yeah, Paul.
Well, I mean, early in that scene, he starts to speak, and she, basically shuts him down. She just wants him to listen, right? Listen to her body, and I think Jim is trying to listen to the whole play, but he's not listening how she needs him to listen. And so once he really shuts up and tries to understand from a different level, I don't know if Jim gets there. I think what's exciting about the play is that it is so widely perceived by everybody who sees it. So unfortunately, I can't control how people perceive the final scene in the play and the final moments in the play. I can only perceive it for myself and how I interpret it with Robert, our director, and with Jeremy, our playwright, and with Chiquina, who I'm playing the scene with. So, to me, he finally listens, and he does the thing that she wanted him to go to the therapy for.
Like, yes, he listens, but I think the point about the audience, or at least the white audience, being comfortable or uncomfortable with sort of taking away the lesson is, yes, you listen, but could you actually listen? Like, is it possible for you to even understand what she's saying? Or are you always going to miss something? So it's sort of the question of, when she says, thank you for listening, is she saying, like, thank you, you finally understand me? Or is it, thank you for listening, you still will never fully understand my experience? Like, thank you for trying, but there's still some discomfort left over.
And I'm giving
I think that's the question. Like, what's left over at the end?
To Chiquina Kalakanga. The last word to Chiquina Kalakanga.
I think what you're experiencing is the fact that the last scene is what they were supposed to do in the first scene.
Right.
And so what you see in the second act is all of the couples, after they've fully done the act, literally carrying the trauma in their bodies and doing that act, they're starting to then now process. This is day 4, and that day 4 is the actual acting of it, and then day 5, 6, and 7 is supposed to be the unpacking of what all that means. And so at that point, what you're getting is right on the cusp of him finally committing to the act, so you don't know. Yeah. And that's kind of where it leaves you. We'll never know.
Sure.
You'll never know, and you won't either if you don't run down and get your ticket. Slay Play, and I'm Tanya Pinkins, and this is the cast of Slay Play. Give them a hand.